Put it down.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Here we go again.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadrome, the place where we swim back upstream against the currents, where all the animals are coming out to eat you, like a sad salmon being observed by bears and eagles, the Anadrome. Well, what we're doing tonight, well, it's tonight for me, who knows what time it is for you. I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, and Georgia is not that Georgia in America with Macon and Atlanta and all those places. It's Georgia in the Caucasus. It's a rainy night here in Tbilisi in the mountains. Well, what we're going to do is review a movie that came out a few weeks ago called Abigail. I meant to get it out earlier, but that's okay, because I am going to spoil the hell out of this movie, because I don't actually care about if you want to watch the movie and if you haven't seen it yet and you care about having movies spoiled for you, stop now, turn around, go back. It's all over. I am just going to spoil everything. And really, it's a film I wish certain parts of it had not been spoiled for me. But they make it pretty hard. Even the poster makes it hard to ignore what's about to happen. But anyway, I was actually quite impressed by this film. And I felt I needed to talk about it because I also saw it in terms of a larger picture related to some other films that have come out in the last couple of years. And we'll get to that in the second part of this review. But let's just deal with the film. It's made by a group called Radio Silence Productions, which is an American film and television production company. They were founded in 2011. Matt Bettinelli, Olpin, Tyler Gillette, Justin Martinez, and Chad Villella. Is that Villella? Villella. If it's a Spanish-sounding name, it's Villella. Yeah. 2 double L's. Go figure. Anyway, this group is known for horror films that have pretty much hit the mark. Ready or Not, Scream, 5 and 6 are all, they're not necessarily up there with, The Exorcist or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or anything like that, but they are very solid films, and they tend to have very solid scares and a bit of humor thrown in. Ready or Not particularly does. And so does Abigail. Abigail has quite a bit of dark humor, shall we say. And I would say I like Abigail even more than Ready or Not, although I'm ready to watch Ready or Not again anytime. Now, the basic plot is this. Instead of what Joe Bob Briggs calls spam in a cabin, we've got people locked up in an old Gothic house, and they are all criminals who don't really know each other and are given pseudonyms, as in The Usual Suspects, which I think is an influence on this film. Also, they're kind of like Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which was also known as 10 Little Indians and had a more politically incorrect name even before that. But it's the idea of people getting whacked off one after another. You've seen this film before. Evil Dead, that's where Joe Bob Briggs invented the spam in a cabin plot idea.
I don't want to tell you anything about the plot,
But here at Drive-In Theater, we call it spam in a cabin. The teenagers go in, the teenagers do not come out.
You get the idea. There's people kind of stuck in a place, they're going to get killed. Now, what they're doing there is they have been solicited and paid, or will be paid, to kidnap a young girl about 12 years old, a ballerina, who is the titular character, Abigail.
I pinky promise you, it'll all be over soon.
Joey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
You all came highly recommended. You know the rules. No real names, no backstories, no cell phones.
So whose kid is she?
A very wealthy man who's about to be $50 million poorer.
I'm here to make sure you're safe.
What's your name? Mine's Abigail.
You can call me Joey.
Do you have any kids?
I have a little boy.
See you in 24 hours.
And she is played by Alicia Ware, who comes out of who knows where. Well, I think it's actually pronounced Weir. What an amazing performance. She is someone to watch. There are other people in this film who are worthy actors. Melissa Barrera, who was also in the Scream films, and I won't get into all the drama surrounding her, but she does a solid job. And there are others. If you've seen a certain amount of television or movies, you'll recognize some of the people in this film. But to me, it's all about the image of the young girl ballerina who, now we're in the spoiler territory, is a vampire. And it's a fascinating image. It's a young girl who's a vampire. And like I say, she plays this perfectly because on one hand, she does the innocent young girl really well, and then changes, and all of a sudden she is, shall we say, scary as all hell. Or, as they say, scary as all get out. That's a nice American expression that a lot of people don't understand if you don't live in America.
Please let me out. I'm scared.
Cut the shit. You're really good at pretending to be a little girl.
Thank you.
Quick question. Who's inside a cage right now?
Yeah, absolutely believable on both the real innocent part and the very, very frightening part. And yeah, they give her a little bit of, some prosthetic teeth and a little bit of blood dripping down. But that's not what makes her scary. You can give those to almost anybody, and who cares? Now, one thing I thought I would do is mention some of what I perceive to be the inspirations for this film. And some of these have been said in interviews. Others of them I intuited for my own self. And see if you agree. Okay, well, they said, the Radio Silence guys, said that one of the big influences was Daughter of Dracula, which is a 1930s film which was made to be the next film after Dracula in the original Dracula series. Dracula was 1931. This was a couple years later. Now, I would say that the connection between these two films is loose. And that is to say that the daughter of Dracula in that movie is not at all. She's not a ballerina. She's not young. She is much more, she's like a sophisticated young woman. There's a lesbian subtext, as there are in almost all female vampire films. I would say some of the I've already mentioned two of the real inspirations for this film, one being The Usual Suspects, and the idea not only of the people being given names and don't really know each other. You can see Reservoir Dogs in this as well. But the other thing being, we don't know who hired them. And I find that to be an interesting aspect as well. We are told that it's a crime boss. That doesn't prove to be exactly true. Or then there's a secondary factor of who is the crime boss. Also, Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is I would look at as a prime text. Very, very much seminal work because it isolates a group of figures, 10, and then kills them off one by one. And of course, you, the reader or the watcher of the various versions of the film, are all sitting there going, I wonder who it is. And then, well, we won't go, but it goes down to the last two. And there are some surprises in that plot line. This one doesn't quite do that, but you get the same feeling of one after another, which of course you get in every slasher film. But because this is in an isolated house, very gothic house, and that's very important.
What the fuck?
Shit, we gotta get out of here.
In the beginning, we're wondering who's doing it, but it becomes clear very soon. It's the little midget girl. She's not really a midget, and she's not really that small. But the truth of the matter is, she's just this little girl. And she is pretty damn strong. She's an old vampire, which brings us to the next inspiration for this film. She is very much like the child vampire Claudia in Interview with the Vampires, particularly the Kristen Dunst version of that piece. Kristen Dunst, that's just like one of the greatest child performances ever. I have my questions about the actual movie. There are points of it I really love. Love the Antonio Banderas section where doing the theater of vampires and such, as I would, being a person who appreciates weird theatrical styles, particularly from the late 19th century in Europe. But Kristen Dunst Claudia is on another level altogether. She really holds the film together because she manages, because she's a young girl in the beginning and just keeps aging over the years, many, many years, she becomes this very strange character. Crucial stuff. And this character has some of that as well. Although, like I say, one of the big differences here is there are comic underpinnings to this film as well. There are moments where you have to just laugh because, of things I'll let you go to the film and watch. Another interesting inspiration for this film, and I am wondering, I can't imagine they didn't watch this film, and it's a very obscure, more recent vampire film from the aughts, the late aughts. And, or was it, I think it's around 2011, 2012, sometime like that. It's called Livide, or it's a French film in the French language, and you should see it in the French language with subtitles, Livide. It's about an old dark house, like this one, vampires in the old house, and there is a ballerina vampire. Now, the interesting thing about this ballerina vampire is this house was run by a ballet teacher. And the ballet teacher is also the mother, and she's turning her young ballerina daughter into a mechanical ballerina who dances like she's on a music box. Now, you've probably seen some of these music boxes that have made, they still make them, they've been making them probably since the late 18th century. Little music boxes, you open them up, and a ballerina spins around while the music is playing. I know that very well because I know my automata and I know my ballerinas. And the truth of the matter is, this isn't an accidental image. There's something in this film that deals with that. The young girl, there's a great images at the beginning of the film of her dancing near a theater curtain, but kind of show her arms in a very strange kind of distorted lens that makes them look like they're almost like snakes. But there's also this mechanical sense about her dancing, which then is turned into horrific balletic moves in the film. And this girl really knows how to move as a ballerina. And so that's why this the acting in this is so great. Not only is she hitting the innocence and the comedy and the horror, real horror, but she's also hitting the dance moves as well. Just amazing. Kind of this tension between the beautiful and the horrific, which are some of my favorite films that can do that. Now, having seen this film, I walked out and suddenly several other films came to my mind almost instantly that started coming out from the beginning, end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And there were these films about young girls, youngish girls, dolls, evil, demons. But before we get there, let's go back a little ways. The first major set of films that were, we'll call them evil children films or evil young people films. It starts in the 1950s with The Bad Seed. Patty McCormick in that does just this chilling job of being really a psychopathic young girl. Then you come to 1960s Village of the Damned, which has these creepy little blonde kids with hypnotic eyes, followed up by its sequel, The Children of the Damned, a bit later in the decade. Then in the 1970s, literally all hell breaks loose, and you get The Exorcist. And then, a couple years later, The Omen. And the same year as The Omen, you have Carrie, who is a girl who has her first period during the film. She's going through puberty as the film. Again, these young girls. And then at the end of the 70s, you have The Brood, which is one of the most chilling films about evil children ever made. David Cronenberg. Could be, to me, it's in his top 5. And it's maybe his scariest film. So I just point that out. Now, there continue to be evil children in films. And there continue to be, for instance, like Chucky is kind of an evil child, although it's a doll. One of the things that was noted by the end of the 70s was that the evil child motif was certainly a motif related to the rebellion of youth. And that is to say that the people making the films were adults. And we could no longer trust that our young people after the 60s and going into the 70s could be seen as innocent anymore. That is very fascinating. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. We could go back to the television series Wednesday in late 2022 with Jenna Ortega and her Wednesday Addams dance and such like that. And that is a good place to go back to. It was followed up a couple months later by M3GAN. Now, M3GAN to me is really the first film in this series that has continued for a while that does something. It takes 2 specific images. One image is of the innocent girl, and the other image is of the doll. The doll or the mechanical creation of the android. And M3GAN is the android from hell with this very sweet, but very much uncanny valley type of face. And that film to me hit on many different levels. But again, hitting this thing of innocence. There's another girl in the film who is a real girl who is more innocent, although she is experiencing darkness. And it puts the two together with our ability to create these new weird machines and what it means to be a child. More specifically, what it means to be a young woman. Which then brings us to the heavy hitter of this conglomeration, and that is Barbie, the Barbie movie. And it's not a horror film, very obviously. It's a comedy, very light. There is a bit of messaging, shall we call it, and the messaging, whatever. But what's fascinating to me is that it's about a doll, in the end, who seeks to be human. And again, there is this question in our society. It's referring back to, in some sort of oblique way, to a larger question, the question, what is a woman? And there is a tension here. And this tension is going to run through all the films following. But it specifically hits the question of young girls. And as young girls grow up in our society, what are they becoming? What do they see? Will they become androids, cyborgs? Will they become more like dolls? And in fact, there are many ways in which people are. With all the cosmetics, cosmetic surgery, and all of these things, there are all these doll girls. I've researched this many more times. But then we come to a film which is certainly not made for children whatsoever, and yet has the same kind of innocent doll girl, and that is Poor Things.
She's an experiment.
Good evening.
Her brain and her body are not quite synchronized. But she's progressing at an accelerated pace.
Gorgos Lanthimos, very indie-type film, postmodern film, starring Emma Stone, and she won the Academy Award for this rather bizarre performance. And what she does is she shows a woman who's totally innocent, has no moral structure, goes through horrendous things. It's a lot like Voltaire's Candide, where no matter how bad things get, there's always, this is the best of all possible worlds. But what's interesting to me is she's made up of parts of other human beings. She is the doll motif taken into Frankenstein or into the androids, pushed again into this postmodern lens. You're watching that film, and what is and what isn't moral is, I think the people making that film believed in amorality, that nothing is really inherently moral. Well, of course, when you watch the film, you don't quite feel that way. That is to say, watching the film is a bit of it gets to you after a while. It has its humor, it has its fantasy, and it also has its darkness and its questioning of what makes a woman. Can anything, set of images, be cobbled together to make a woman? Which then brings us to the darkest film on this list, When Evil Lurks, an Argentinian horror film, which out of everything here, this is the true horror film. And if you haven't seen it, I would recommend looking for it. It's in Spanish, but of course you can find the subtitled version. Do not watch it. If there's a dubbed version of this, do not watch that. Don't be ridiculous. You got to get the original language. But here's the point. Without going into it's a complex film with really complex imagery, and the image of the evil child, more than just a girl, but certainly the evil girl shows up in this film. Evil girl with, toy stuffed plush animals, the whole works. Absolutely chilling. I will not go into explaining what this film is, because but let's put it to you this way: on a scale of, what is this closer to? Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Hereditary. If you get those meanings, this is heavyweight stuff. Well worth watching when you don't have children in the room, or as they said in The Elephant Man, or nervous persons. So there again, you have the evil child. And here you really have the child rebelling against the society. Then we have Exorcist Believer. I've done a review of that. I have nothing else to add. It's not a film really worth seeing because it so inverts the clauses of The Exorcist. However, it does have the evil, two evil girls, young girls, who are very much in this mold. They come out of the evil child mode, but what we're seeing here is specifically the evil young girl, or the young girl who is on the borderline between human and non-human. The strongest part of that film is their possession sequence. Then you have Sydney Sweeney's film that just came out recently. It's her film, both in terms of her being the main actress and her producing the film and instigating the creation of it, which is really interesting because it's a film totally soaked in Catholic, shall we say, mythology, as opposed to true Catholicism. But without going into that film, which if you like horror films and if you're particularly interested in Catholic horror, I really recommend Immaculate. But by the time you get to the end, and there are questions of the relationship between the young girl who's more innocent. She's no longer a child at this point, but she's a young woman. But the questions are, how does she become less than immaculate? And what is the source of that? And again, there's this scientific element, or is it science? Is it some sort of sorcery or mysticism? And then at the end, there is, shall we say, a very severe reaction to the birth of her child. I will not spoil it. You have to see it. You walk out of that film being slugged with quite a bit of blood. A very interesting film. Not perfect by any means. If you're looking for a film that totally holds together in the sense department, this is not it. But it works. And it works very well. And it does, again, you've got a girl who rejects her motherhood. She almost is forced to. She rejects, and rejecting motherhood is a big deal in these films.
Please help me. We have to leave.
Because, M3GAN can't have a child. The last thing that happens in the Barbie movie is she goes to a gynecologist. Very interesting. Maybe she is trying to get past that sterility of the doll. We won't even go to Poor Things, because who knows what was going on in that film. And when evil lurks, believe me, you don't want any of these children to be born. But then you come to the first Omen, which came out like a month, within the month after Immaculate. And again, you have another young woman, a little bit older than the Sydney Sweeney character, who ends up, shall we say, I wonder what kind of child she's going to have that she probably doesn't want. It's the first Omen, you guess. So you're getting this picture here. And finally you come to Abigail. And Abigail is trapped forever in the body of a young girl, as is Claudia from Interview with a Vampire. And I think this relates to so many of the questions that women have these days about themselves and their identity. We have these doll girls. We have these girls who never grow up. The juvenilization of not only girls, but also of boys and men. I mean, we have a society where we have 50-year-old children walking around. They are leeches. They are vampires. They do not know their own bodies. They are, in a sense, becoming cyborgs. And these films are talking not only about what will the young girls of our world become. Can they reproduce human beings? But they're also asking this question. Are these the young girls, or are they not the old girls. And what's interesting to me about Abigail is you get to the end of Abigail, and I started thinking about Livide, as soon as I was done with this film. And then I went back and looked at it a little bit, and I realized that, yeah, there you have the ballerina becoming like the automaton, the music box doll. And it's a perfect circle.
Anna, t'es pas morte.
And I don't think it's an accident that these films are coming out in the way they are. It's different than the cycle of evil child films in the late 60s through the 70s, which was more about the larger cultural rebellion of children. Whereas now what we're not seeing is the cultural rebellion of the young, but rather we're seeing the cultural containment of the young. They are trapped inside their young bodies forever. Or rather, their brains, their young brains, are trapped inside their growing bodies. Well, that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you see it very differently. That's fine. And but think about these films together. Look at some of them and consider them. Contrast them next to each other. Well, that should do it for today. And thanks for coming. And go watch these films. You need to see them. Some of them are really fascinating. And all of these films are worth a watch. And if you've got a stomach for it, watch the horror ones. But then again, you have to have a pretty strong stomach. Intestinal fortitude to watch When Evil Lurks. So big warning on that one. However, it is an excellent film. And so are these. And Abigail is, I think, just finished up its theatrical run. Will be showing up on screens somewhere near you. And I will be buying a physical copy because physical copies are where it's at. I'm tired of them owning everything. I'd like to have something on my shelves, which I do. But we'll talk about that some other time. From Tbilisi, Georgia, this is Bern saying droabit, which in Georgian means temporarily. But what it really means is, we'll just be gone from each other for a little while, and we will meet again.
When I go, I want you to give me 5 minutes. I told you, boys, I'm no escape artist. For the first time, I like the odds.
At the round earth's imagined corners, blow your trumpets, angels, and arise, arise from death, you numberless infinities of souls.